What's up guys, welcome to Captured by Shan. I cover all things from tech, photography and video. So if you like that kind of content, make sure you hit the subscribe button. So today we're going to be diving into the Galaxy A31 camera and just going through whether this could be a flagship camera for $220. So, when looking at flagships, there's obviously, firstly, there's a variety of cameras now in 2020. So you have your wide, your standard and your telephoto. So Samsung with the A31 obviously being around that $220, 6,000 Rand price point, went for the more consumer based audience who aren't really photography, fanatics. So they included, and this is all covered in the my first impressions video, which I will link in the cards above and the description below. So they included 4 cameras on the back. You have your depth, your macro, your standard, and your wide angle. So those are the cameras that I feel most consumers use on a day-to-day basis. Ultra wide angle, if you at a train station and you want to capture the scene, boom, you hit the wide angle and you can capture everything. If you're on a hike, you can get the scenery. And then you have your standard, which is a 48 megapixel, so that's super high quality. But there's a few things that I don't really like too much about it, which I'll get into a bit later. And then you have your depth and your macro, which are both 5 megapixel sensors. And those are, at first can seem a bit gimmicky, but after using it, I must say the depth sensor and the live focus feature on the camera is probably what surprised me the most. It really does isolate the subject quite well. And it does blow out the background quite nicely. And, that just gives the image a bit more dynamic. With that being said, there are a few things. The image is a bit flat, so it lacks a bit of contrast and saturation, which isn't like Samsung. But good news is you can just always, add that in post and get that nice punchy image. So the macro lens obviously is not going to be like your macro centered lens that you find for DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. They, just meant for the consumer to capture something really tiny. So whether it be a bee on a plant, insect, anything of that nature, or detail on packaging, you can capture it on that. So that's a nice added, it's not really meant to be used every single day for every single item, but you can use it and get some really nice images. I'll put some up now. I think, like I said, you're going to need to do a lot of post editing with some of these images because the camera isn't as advanced as your flagship cameras. So they don't really give you a final processed image that you'd find on, for instance, the S20 or the S20 Ultra or, any of those S lineups. I feel like you can get the image to that if you just add a bit of love in post. Moving on to what I'd say would be the 2 most used lenses, the standard and the ultra wide. So the standard lens, is going to be one of your best quality images, and it comes with 2 variants. So you can use the 48 megapixel high resolution sensor, or you can dumb it down and use a lower, pixel image with that same field of view. With that being said, the ultra high resolution 48 megapixel is only good if there's sufficient light and if you have time. Why I say that is when you're using a 48 megapixel camera, it obviously needs to process that entire 48 megapixel image. And with the camera being budget censored, the processor can't really handle it, and it can't really spit out the image as quickly as it would, on the normal image. So there's that. So if you're trying to capture a moment that would go by in a few seconds, don't use the 48 megapixel sensor. Go for the lower pixel image, just because of speed. And obviously, because it's taking time to process it, if you're moving a lot, you can lose focus on your shot. And it actually tells you that in the camera app. It'll say, we think this image might be out of focus. So that's something to consider, versus using the normal, which is the lower res option with the standard lens. And that's straight out of the box what it's set to. With that, there's HDR and it's a faster experience. The images look more rounded. It doesn't need that much work compared to the 48 megapixel. And I think you can see this in some of the images. You know, the HDR I think is probably one of the best features all phones have received with their cameras over the last 5 years. Stay away from the 48 megapixel unless you're in bright sunlight and you have time to capture the image. Moving into the super wide angle, and when you put up the standard lens versus the super wide, you can see a massive difference. I think the ultra wide lens is going to be one of the most used lenses if you buy this phone, just because of the amount you can capture in frame. And if you look at the latest Google devices, the Pixel 4a 5G and the Pixel 5 5G, they've included an ultra wide lens, and that's gotten the tech community really excited. And the reason being is because you can just capture more. And this camera is really, you know, at 8 megapixels, it's not going to be the most detailed ultra wide shot, but you're going to get a lot and it's going to be quite punchy. It's got HDR enabled, which is nice. If it didn't, you know, that would have been a bit of an issue, but because it does, it allows you to, you know, get a lot of dynamic range in the shot, get your highlights and your shadows exposed, you know, at a decent level where you can see a lot of detail. So, you know, selfie camera, again, as mentioned in my first impressions video, I'm not a big user of the selfie camera for that purpose. I use it maybe for, you know, WhatsApp calls and those kind of things, and that it does a really good job with a 20 megapixel sensor. But, you know, for photography and video, it's something I don't really use, so it wouldn't be fair for me to give critique on that because I don't really use that function. But I think overall, the cameras, is it flagship quality? No, but you can get flagship quality shots out of it. So if you put a bit of care in post and put a bit of time into it, I think you can really get some great images. So yeah, I think Samsung's done a really great job with this set of cameras on this device, especially at this price point, $200 to 6,000 Rand. I think they're really competing because, you know, these days everyone wants a decent camera in their pocket, and I think this is what they're giving you at a really good price point. So I have a full review coming out on the Galaxy A31, so be sure to hit that subscribe button for that, and until then, I'll see you in the next one.